Could you tell us about your career and how it's led you to become Head of Talent and Organisation Human Potential at Accenture?
Sure, I'm happy to. So I started my career as an athlete, as a professional athlete, and I had two passions in my life, and that was being part of teams and people, and understanding what made people tick. When I knew I wasn't going to be a professional athlete for the majority of my career, I became a social worker and went back to school for a degree in social work. This was all born, Jeremy, out of my family background. I'm the youngest of 8 children. I have 5 sisters, 2 brothers, and I grew up around a dining room table that in the 60s and 70s was focused on human rights, women's rights. Certainly the war in Vietnam was around giving voice to the voiceless, and the obligation that our parents gave to each of us as children to be the voice for the voiceless. And these were central themes as I was growing up, but also in my career. From my schooling in social work, I became a consultant and was able to work with individuals in their careers to help them achieve the goals that they wanted to achieve. Now, as a consultant, as you very well know, nobody calls you because everything's going well. And so it was a way that I felt that I could be of optimal service to people, that I could bring my skills and my care, frankly, to people around the issues that they were struggling with and that they were being demanded of within the workplace. I think that certainly in my career as a consultant, and then I led inclusion and diversity at Apple, and then came back to the consulting world here at Accenture, I have had the themes that were created around my dining room table of fighting for the underdog, being that voice to the voiceless, looking at the issues of inclusion, diversity, equity, frankly, human rights, mental health, and women's rights.
You know, if you don't have peace of mind, then it's difficult to build peace. The awareness around mental health is getting better, but how serious, Christie, is the crisis?
I think it's incredibly serious. And, you know, I listen to pundits and to the research that is out there today, and certainly coming out of a physical health pandemic, about whether our countries are prepared for the next pandemic, as if, you know, it's looming. And I get frustrated, to be very honest with you, Jeremy, because I believe that the next pandemic is already here and we're facing it in mental health. 9 in 10 US adults think that that their country is experiencing a mental health crisis. That's incredible. 1 in 10 employees experience thinking about and self-report the issue for them of self-harm or suicide. Workplace suicides have gone up in the US 39%. Apathy is an issue. You know, we are looking at people being disengaged, who are leaving their jobs, who no longer really care about advancement. And we are hearing things like quiet quitting or presenteeism, which is the technical term for being on the job but not fully able to work. Americans certainly have become increasingly lonely and isolated. A third of adults and young people say that their mental health has gotten worse since 2020. These are incredible statistics to think about, and they're not just in the US, they're globally. So, for instance, 1 in 5 adults didn't seek help during the pandemic because they think that their problem wasn't serious enough from a mental health standpoint. And now they're feeling more isolated and isolated. So I think we are in the next pandemic, and I think we haven't even reached the tipping point of this pandemic. And I think we have to address it in our organizations and in our communities.
Christie, that's amazing to hear. What is actually going on around the mental health of people. Our workplaces, homes, communities, schools, etc. What can we do?
Yeah, I think that there are several things that we can do and we must do. First is awareness. I don't think that we're talking about this issue as a global pandemic like we talked about COVID as a global pandemic. I think we have to acknowledge that. And I think we have to address that this is fundamentally ripping apart our society. We are seeing it on a daily basis, Jeremy, as we walk down the streets of some of the major cities, certainly here in the US that I see, but as I travel around the world, and the increase in homelessness and drug addiction and what needs to be done. So I think there's a systemic solution here. And it starts with admitting that we have the problem, right? And that this is a problem that is so severe, we must address it. I think the second thing that we need to do is to do what we did in the pandemic, which is to have workplaces, private sector and public sector partner across each to build solution and task forces and frankly, medical help for individuals who are suffering. I think Accenture is done an incredible job and is the leading voice in breaking down kind of the stigma of mental health and having these open and honest conversations. We have appointed our own chief health officer and Dr. Tam Brownlee, who is committed to promoting positive mental health at Accenture. Over 8,900 individuals within Accenture are trained as mental health allies. These are things that we should engage in. Organizations like Better Up and Thrive have grown out of the pandemic to be central to companies' solutions and providing help for their people. People like Dr. Michael Gervais in Finding Mastery is working with CEOs alongside of us to think about how do we solve for mental health in our organizations while building high performance in not only leaders, but teams. So I think there's much that we can do. We can run some of the playbook that we've seen coming out of COVID.
It's fascinating, Christie, hearing you talk and how Accenture is clearly, one of the market leaders, right, in relation to peace of mind, creating peace in the workplace. Do you see a direct correlation of you investing time in peace of mind of workforces around the world in order to create a more peaceful environment?
Without doubt, we will not create peace in the world if we don't solve for every individual's mental health. And in the domain that I sit in, that means in organizations, right? And I think organizations are dipping into more of these social issues, whether that be LGBTQ rights, whether that be human rights, whether that be equality. These are all elements of an individual feeling as though they're seen, heard, and valued, which is core to our mental health. There is work that I did many years ago on this concept of covering, and that is hiding a key aspect of who I am and the impact that hiding has on my sense of self and my sense of contributions within the workplace. When we are covering an aspect of ourself, whether that is our sexuality, whether that is our ethnicity, whether that is our family dynamics, or for a woman having a child, that is like asking employees to work with one hand tied behind their back. One of the key findings that we actually found in that study was that many people, a majority of people, cover that they have some sort of mental health issue. Now, this is very personal to me, and it has a detrimental effect to them at work. This has a personal I have a personal story around this, Jeremy, and that was when I was in the towers in 9/11, and I was 3 months into a new job where I was a partner at a firm. And frankly, I compartmentalized and didn't address the issue of what I saw that day and what I lived through that day in New York. And I kept that hidden. I covered that for 10 years, Jeremy. For 10 years, I did not deal with the post-traumatic stress, the anxiety, the periods of depression and fear that I felt when I traveled into major cities and even not in major cities. And it wasn't until I was addressing 10 years later a group of veterans that it spilled out. And it spilled out in dramatic fashion. I became a puddle. First of all, I started to cry uncontrollably in front of this group. I worried incessantly because I was the leader of an effort we were doing with this group. And I thought, oh my God, I'm losing it. This is going to impact me in my career. And I had to really address 10 years of hiding and not addressing post-traumatic stress. Now, did that impact my work? Absolutely. It impacted my work. I mean, I was still a high performer, but I hid out. I didn't go to meetings in the middle of a city because I didn't want to have to drive into New York in particular when I was living there. It impacted my relationships because I hid this from people. And it impacted, my sense of flourishing because I was hiding this. This is something that I think is so incredibly, I don't want anybody to go through what I did. And that peace of mind impacting myself, my relationships, my work doesn't do anyone good in terms of creating peace in the world. It goes back to that old adage, if you don't own it yourself, how can you give it away? So I think that there is much we need to do. If we want peace in the world, we must seek peace for ourselves internally first.
Wow. Christie, that's quite a story. I had no idea, of course. And I didn't see what you saw, but I was there that day. And yeah, and what a day, right? It sort of brings me to tears to even think about it. So let's move on. And well done you. So I won't be a puddle. I'm going to be inspired by your strength. And let's carry on. So if companies can address the assault on our mental health, what impact will it have for the companies and for the individuals that work for them?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you will have healthier, happier, and more fulfilled employees. Your organizations, and we see this in the work that we do with companies daily, they will benefit, on the hard things that companies look at, right? In reduced employee turnover, more engaged people, greater productivity. All of those things are measurable and wonderful. But what I think is even more important than those things is that people will feel fulfilled, engaged, they will have a sense of belonging. And because of that, they will have a more desire to engage with other employees, engage in innovation, engage in problem solving, and engage in helping the outcome of that company. And they will see that they are integral to their company's success. And frankly, that their company is invested in their own success. The employer-employee relationship has fundamentally changed, Jeremy, since the pandemic. And employees are really deciding who, where, and what they want to be engaged in the workforce. And they're making those decisions based on whether a company's insides match their outsides from a purpose standpoint, from a values standpoint, and from a personal investment in that employee to grow their skills, to grow their capabilities, to give them opportunity, to not silo them. All of these things are becoming increasingly important with regards to employers' need to care for their employee. So I think that there is a lot that companies can do to really engage their employees in a fundamentally different way.
Well, Christie, thank you so much on this International Day of UN Peacekeepers for sharing such a, well, such an inspiring story about peace building and peace of mind in the workplace. Thank you, Christie. You're amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeremy, for all that you do. And you are just incredible yourself. So thank you.